Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Thursday Night Live. It's good to see you all in tonight, and got a good group, 7 at my coming in. That's not bad. So let's see who we have here. There's Alan and Angeline. Good to see you. Jenny and Sam. Hello, hello. Let's see who else. There's Karen, obviously. David and Margaret. They're all there as well. I think that might be all that I'm seeing at the moment. Of course, we have others who come in, some who watch after. Sister Marlene, Sister Helga come in after, and so hopefully we have a few that will be watching tonight. But we're certainly glad you came in. There's Mark and Angela. Good to see you, and Jacob. Hello to you guys. I hope you've had a good day. Hope you've all had a good day. We had some fun yesterday with yet another blockage in the pipes, but we got that fixed yesterday thanks to a nice plumber who came after hours for us. We got it all fixed up, so that was a real blessing not to have to worry about things like that anymore. So tonight we're looking at the book of Exodus chapter 8, and hope that you guys will find your way there in your Bibles, because we, again, as it is with these every time, we're covering a lot of ground, and I'm pretty much skimming the surface for you all. There's Dieter. Hello, Dieter. Good to see you. And so with this, we'll be moving through. I've entitled this "The Plagues Continue," because that's where we're at in the book of Exodus. God is judging Egypt for their keeping Israel in bondage for 400 years. And he has determined that he's going to show his power over Pharaoh and over the Egyptians, and to bring Israel out like a flock, because they are his flock. That's how he describes them, as his people, his nation, his flock. And so we take up the story in Exodus chapter 8, beginning in verse 1. I'm going to read verses 1 through 4. It says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, Go unto Pharaoh, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs, and the river shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into thine house, and into thy bedchamber, and upon thy bed, and in the house of thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thine ovens, and into thy kneading troughs. And frogs shall come up both on thee and upon thy people, and upon all thy servants." So a bit of a warning, right? So the judgments don't happen without warning. And all that had to happen here was Pharaoh allow the nation of Israel, which were living within their borders as slaves, to leave and to make their way out of the country. That's what God required. But Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And even though they had the plague of water turning to blood, and them having a hard time finding water to drink, even though they lived in a nation where the river Nile flowed right through the middle of it, they had to dig around the rivers to find water that was drinkable. They couldn't drink of the river water as they normally would. So Jehovah has given a warning to Pharaoh, "Let my people go." Remember, this message follows the pattern that God had given to Moses, that Jehovah would speak to Moses. Moses would tell to Aaron what to say, and Aaron would speak to Pharaoh. And so this was followed in this instance as well. The message from Jehovah: "Let my people go, that they may serve me." In other words, Pharaoh was standing in the way of their service to God, and God was not pleased with that. He said, "If not, I'll smite you. I'll smite all thy borders with frogs." This word "smite" is interesting because it's probably what you think. It means to beat or to inflict punishment. So just imagine, God is telling Pharaoh, "Let my people go, or else I'm going to punish you by sending frogs into all your borders, that is, all of your lands." And so Pharaoh could have heeded that warning and let the people go. Of course, he did not. Now it's interesting here. We'll bring this up because much has been made of, the plagues that God sends upon Egypt. Not only do they judge Egypt, but in a sense they judge the false gods that were worshipped in Egypt. And this idea of frogs and the Egyptians is an interesting one. If you recall, the Egyptians, like the Canaanites and like many of the peoples of that time, were worshiping and serving the creation and not the creator, right? So they would worship the sun, moon, the stars. They would worship the fish, the crocodile. They would worship the bull. They would worship a goat. They would worship anything that was a creation, anything that they could see and could think about. Well, with regard to the frogs and the Egyptians, frogs, I'm reading this to you because I've copied this out. Frogs held a significant symbolic meaning in the Egyptian religion and culture. The frog was associated with Heket, a goddess of fertility and childbirth and renewal. Heket was often depicted as a frog or a woman with a frog's head, reflecting the frog's connection to the water, to life, to regeneration, as frogs were abundant in the Nile's fertile environment and linked to annual flooding that sustained agriculture. Frogs were frogs were seen as symbols of life and abundance due to their association with the water and their rapid reproduction. And in some contexts, they appeared in amulets and iconography to invoke Heket's protection, especially for pregnant women during childbirth. So you can see how a person with a darkened mind, with a mind affected by sin, they would see frogs. They would see, hundreds of tadpoles springing forth from the eggs that were laid by the river's brink. They would attach the two together, and so this would become a goddess of fertility. And because this goddess that they had, Heket, lived in the water of the river Nile, which was also considered to be, the thing from which all life sprang, because it, as we said before, the water, which was in the first judgment being turned to blood of the river Nile, was used to keep plants alive, was used for drinking. It was a very, very big part of the life of the Egyptians. And the first judgment took that away. The second one here is Heket, which is the false god that they also worshipped, and they looked to help them to be fertile and to have many children, which was the desire of the peoples of that day. Frogs are mentioned in the Bible. I find this out. I did a bit of a search on this today. It's found 14 times in the Old and in the New Testament. And of course, 11 of those instances are in Exodus chapter 8, of course, because it is the plague of frogs, so you would expect that. But it has other locations. Psalm 78, verse 45 is one, talking about this event. It says, "He sent divers sorts of flies among them, which devoured them, and frogs which destroyed them." So here in the Psalms, talking about the events of this plague. Also in Psalm 105:30, their land brought forth frogs in abundance and in the chambers of the kings. So again, we see the reflection back to this plague of frogs. So now that means 13 of these have reference to that event. Well, and there's one other use. And those of you who have read Revelation a lot probably know where it is. It is in the book of Revelation, chapter 16, verse 13. Listen to this reference. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon and of the mouth of the beast and out of the mouth of the false prophet. So they were like frogs coming out of the mouth. And, we need to, when we're looking at this, we need to realize how these were used in false religions, right? So the frog in their religion represented, I suppose you could say, fertility. We talked about that. And the amulets and that were for to be worn by women to protect them. So if these evil spirits are coming out of the mouths of these three, and they are like frogs, then you would expect it, like a frog, to spread very quickly, to multiply very quickly. It was going to be coming out of their mouths, that is the mouths of the dragon, the mouth of the beast, and the mouth of the false prophet. These things, these words that are coming out of their mouth are going to multiply, right? That's a good idea when we can look back at the Bible and see how these things are depicted. It helps us in other places. Frogs were everywhere, brother. They were everywhere. It says they came up everywhere, even into the kneading troughs. That would be great, wouldn't it? To be having your bread kneading out, and you turn around and look back and there's a frog. That would be horrible. I can imagine what a plague of frogs would be like. It would be worse than summertime in Queensland with the cane toads squawking and barking out in the backyard, hundreds of them after a rain. But this was well and truly a plague. And we see also that only Jehovah, only the great I Am, could remove the plague, because he was the one who put the plague upon the people. It says in verse 5, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying to Aaron, stretch forth thine hand with thy rod, he said, over the streams, over the rivers, over the ponds, and cause frogs to come up upon the land of Egypt. And Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. It says here, and the magicians, that is the Egyptian magicians which were in the house of Pharaoh, did so with their enchantments and brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt. And we've discussed this about their ability, as we'll see in a moment, lack of ability sometimes to reproduce the plagues that God was bringing. Remember how we gave the options here. It was either allowed to be done by evil spirits, which I highly doubt. It was could have been a sleight of hand. In other words, there were plenty of frogs around, right? So it could have been some sort of sleight of hand or magic that they used in those cases. Or I think the most possible here is that God just allowed them to be able to do it in order that Pharaoh's heart might be hardened. And regardless of whether the magicians can do the plague or not, it's like the water to blood, which the magicians apparently were able to reproduce. You still have a plague on your hands. They don't remove it. Like I said, Pharaoh should have said, remove the plague to his magicians, and let's see if they were able to remove it. They would not have been able to do so. Nevertheless, don't want to belabor the point too much, but there was a plague on Egypt. And Pharaoh had finally, at least it appears, had enough of the plague. Because it says in verse 8, then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go, and they may do sacrifice unto the Lord. And Moses said unto Pharaoh, glory over me. When shall I entreat for thee, and for thy servants, and for thy people, to destroy the frogs from thee and thy houses, that they may remain in the river only? And he said, tomorrow. And he said, be it according to thy word, that thou mayest know that there is none like unto the Lord our God. So, tomorrow. So when do you want the healing? Now give it to me tomorrow. That it's the sign of a true non-believer, right? So he, when do you want it to happen? Not immediately. No. Let's wait till tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. Do it then. So do you think maybe Pharaoh had some cunning plan in his mind? What if this is all just a result of something else and not God? What if the frogs have just come up out of the rivers because of something that might have come down the river? Let's give it some time. Maybe they'll go back before tomorrow and I'll have something over Moses. Maybe he thought like that. Who knows? But I think it's odd. I'll do it another day. This is what lost people do with salvation, right? It's the whole Felix thing. Come back when I have a more convenient season, and I will call on the Lord then. There is no tomorrow. There's only now. So why not say now? Who knows? That this is the twisted mind of Pharaoh, a mind twisted by sin, and trying to cling to power in a nation that was very unforgiving toward their leaders. Well, it says Moses said, "Yeah, I will do it. I will entreat for you." And it's interesting. The word entreat here has in it the idea of to burn incense or to worship. In other words, to intercede for someone else. So this is what Pharaoh wants Moses to do: intercede with Jehovah on my account. I like the fact that now you see Pharaoh has gone from Jehovah. Who is Jehovah that I should let the people go? And who are you, Moses and Aaron? Instead, now he's saying, Moses, please entreat with me for God that the plague of these frogs be removed from me. And that's why Moses says, glory over me. In other words, this is it's a great thing that's happening. When shall I entreat for you? Because he said, of course, I'll let your people go. Just entreat the Lord. And of course, Pharaoh said the obvious, which is tomorrow. Send them away tomorrow. Let's spend another night with the frogs. Well, I think you would know then that Jehovah obviously heard Moses' prayer, and he removed the frogs. So verse 13 and 14. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses, it is said, and they gathered them together upon the heaps, and the land stank. So God held up his end in every way. He warned Pharaoh, then he struck Pharaoh and his land with the plague of frogs, as he said he would. Pharaoh said that he would let the people go. He asked Moses to intercede. Moses did so. The Lord, Jehovah, removed the frogs from the land. The land stank, though. That would be a lot of frogs. A lot of frogs. Well, this is what happens to hardened men. Verse 15. But when Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened his heart and hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said. So you see, here's another problem with hard-heartedness, and particularly in the lost. They feel a bit of respite from the conviction, or respite from the troubles affecting their life. And they think, oh, well, that's gone now. The problem is gone. That's what Pharaoh did. When the frogs the next day were removed from out of the land, and they were gathered away from him and out of his sight, he saw it as a time of respite. He was given a bit of a break. This word respite means breathing room. It's actually or an interval, I guess you could think of it that way. A pause where you can take a breath. That's the idea of the word. But Pharaoh hardened his heart. So is this the way we live our life when we feel God, convicting us of things, and the conviction lies heavy on us, and we make promises, and we say we're going to do something, or we're going to follow the word of the Lord, and then when we have a easing of the burden or an easing of the conviction, we feel the respite, the breathing room, and we forget. Well, Pharaoh forgot, because he would not let the people go, as he said he would do. And of course, he's broken a promise. Now, listen to what happens next. It says in verse 16, this is verses 16 through 19, an interesting one. And the Lord said unto Moses, say unto Aaron, stretch out thy rod and smite the dust of the land, that it might become lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And they did so. For Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and smote the dust of the earth, and it became lice in man and in beast. All the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. The magicians were able to repeat this as well, and the magicians did so with their enchantments to bring forth the lice. But they could not. This is the one they could not repeat. And so there were lice upon men and upon beasts. Now, here again, the magicians have been able to do everything so far that has been done by Moses, except for, remember that Moses' serpent, the rod that had been turned into a serpent, ate their rods, which had been turned into serpents. And then Moses picked up the rod again, showing that all the power was resting with God through him. Well, now they're trying to reproduce the lice by striking the dust. One would expect just outside of the area of Pharaoh, but they're not able to reproduce it. And this is interesting, because you would think that these first two plagues would be enough to sway Pharaoh's heart and let the people go, which is what Jehovah was wanting. But even when faced with his own magicians saying this, listen to this, then the magician said unto Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. How about that? So now not only is the plague on them, everyone is scratching and itching. The plague of lice is upon the land. They're covering the beasts of the field. They're plagued with it. The individuals are plagued with it. All the Egyptians. There's not a man, woman, child that's not being infested by these lice. They're everywhere. You can't kill them, because you know what lice are like. You might get rid of them, but if you're in an area where they are, you can be reinfested, and there is no getting rid of them. What a horrible time that would have been for the Egyptians. You see, God had determined to smite them. He smited them when he hit the water and turned it to blood. He smote them when he sent the frogs among them. He smote them again when he sent this plague of lice among them. God keeps hitting them, spanking them, correcting them, and trying to get them to let his people go. That's what he wanted from them. Well, when the magicians say to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God," you expect Pharaoh to go, "My magicians who I trust in, who I call upon every day, have told me this is the finger of God." But Pharaoh hardened his heart because of their saying. Pharaoh might have been afraid in himself, but when they said that about it being the finger of God, the Bible says he hardened his heart. It's an interesting word here, kabed. It means to make it heavy like a stone, to be, in a sense, severe, unyielding, obstinate. That was the heart of Pharaoh. And it only took one phrase for him to harden his heart again. The plague, no doubt, had softened it. But when his magician said, "It is the finger of God," he hardened his heart down. "I will not let them go." No, no, they will not go. And this was predicted by the Lord, if you recall, in each of these plagues, as Pharaoh hardens his heart and becomes obstinate uh, and all the rest, unyielding. The Bible says here too, again, he hearkened not to them. That is, he didn't hear them intelligently. So he wasn't listening to them. His ears, although he heard the words, his ears were closed. To him, in his heart, the matter was resolved. He's not letting them go. And the plague was upon the people. And if you notice, there's no mention of this plague ending. That's interesting, isn't it? There's no mention of him calling out to Moses and to Aaron, to intercede to God on our behalf. That is hardness of heart, when you're not even willing to call on God to relieve you of the plague. Lice were infesting Egypt, and there was no end to this one. You won't find it. And next, and lastly, at least in our passage here in verse 8, the plague of flies. And I might say this, not a great deal to say here about the lice just before we move on. I had a look at this, and look, lice are not worshipped or considered to be any sort of god. They were just looked upon, as they are in every culture, I suppose, as a carrier of disease, of making someone worthy to be kept back from the public, right? It made someone unclean to be infested with lice. Because if you go around people who are infested with lice, guess what? You will be infested with lice. And so these people who were infested were held at arm's length. But the next plague definitely strikes at the heart of their group. The last plague is the plague of flies. So it says in verse 20, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Rise up early in the morning, and stand before Pharaoh. Lo, he cometh forth to the water. And say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. Else if thou wilt not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies upon thee, and upon thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thine houses, and the houses of the Egyptians shall be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground whereon they are. And I will sever in that day the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there, to the end that thou mayest know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth." He said, "And I will put a division between my people and thy people. Tomorrow shall this sign be." Interesting. God's telling him outright, let my people go. You have until tomorrow. Tomorrow, this sign, this next plague will befall you if you do not let my people go. Of course, he's speaking to Pharaoh, who has made his heart like a granite stone, and he's not hearing anything from God or Moses. He's not hearing intelligently. We certainly know that from the end of the plague of the lice, right? He's not listening. He's not heeding. He's not paying attention. He's just hearing the words. Well, the plague came upon them. And of course, the plague was, like all of these plagues, was grievous. And God did distinguish between Egypt and his flock with the plague, because the nation of Israel, the descendants of Israel who were in Goshen, were untouched by the plagues. But the Egyptians, whom God was judging, they were most definitely affected. And Jehovah commanded the plague of the flies in verse 24. It says, "And the Lord did so, and there came a grievous swarm of flies into the house of Pharaoh, and into his servants' houses, and into all the land of Egypt. And the land was corrupted by reason of the swarms of flies. And Pharaoh called for Moses and for Aaron and said, 'Go ye, sacrifice to your God in the land.' And Moses said, 'No, it is not meet for us to do so, for we shall sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. Lo, shall we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, and they will not stone us? We will go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God, as he shall command us.' And Pharaoh said, 'I will let you go, that you may sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness. Only ye shall not go very far away. Entreat for me.' So here, finally, Pharaoh has some sense about him. Go again, burn incense, pray, entreat for me to Jehovah." Well, the Lord can be entreated. And Moses said, "Behold, I go out from thee." This is verse 29. "And I will entreat the Lord that the swarms of flies may depart from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people tomorrow. But let not Pharaoh deal deceitfully any more in not letting the people go to sacrifice to the Lord." And Moses went out from Pharaoh and entreated the Lord. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and he removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh and from his servants and from the people, and there remained not one. Now, that is great respite, to have swarms of flies, from that to not one fly left. That was a sign of the power of God, as those magicians would have said, "It is the finger of God." You know, this word "finger of God," by the way, is a term used initially to describe the dyeing of garments. You know how a person would, with their fingers, they would take the garment and they would dip it into the dye and dip it down again. They would wring the item out, they would hang it up and dry it. And so this word came to mean the fingers. And so you can see with the origin of the word that it refers to working hands, really. So you might say, like, the hand of God. It is the work of God. And that's what the magicians were telling Pharaoh about the lice. This too was the finger of God. This was God taking that great staff and striking Egypt, striking Pharaoh, uh, getting Pharaoh to a point where he would let his people go. And Pharaoh certainly said that he would. But it says after the plague was removed, that Pharaoh hardened his heart. He says in verse 32, "And Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time also." It's interesting terms. We know this word hardened, kabed. We talked about it before, which means to be heavy like a stone, severe, unyielding, obstinate, all of those things. But the idea of at this time also Uh, this word time is a word which is used to describe a stroke. Now, we would think of it as the stroke of a clock, right? Or the ticking of a hand. But I think the idea here is not so much time as it is stroke, that he hardened his heart at this stroke also. So when God struck them with the flies, Pharaoh hardened his heart. Even at this stroke, are we like that? Does God, as God's children, when he corrects us, because the Bible says, the Lord, whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. When we are chastened of God, do we harden our heart at the strokes? Or do we seek mercy and forgiveness? I hope we're not like Pharaoh. We're not supposed to be like the world. The world hardens their heart at things like this. We should be tenderhearted, quick to repent, quick to turn back to the Lord, quick to go back to the way that he has laid out for us. Pharaoh, not so. The strokes only hardened his heart more. And the Bible says, neither would he let the people go. Remember this word people? I told you it refers to, an ethnic group, a nation, but also to a flock. And that's the way Jehovah looked at the descendants of Israel, as his little flock that were so severely treated in Egypt and held in bondage for 400 years. And he was determined to get his people free, and at the same time to judge Pharaoh and Egypt. And he continues to do so. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed that. I might mention one last thing. Hopefully, I've got a little bit of time. Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I want to talk about flies. I could leave this for Brother Dieter for one of his creation moments, but this might not be too exciting. But anyway, I'll just mention this about flies in Egypt. Remember the name Baal Zebub? Well, Baal Zebub, the god of the city of Ekron of the Philistines, was a false god associated with death and disease, and was appeased by sacrifice, as flies are drawn to dead things to feed upon them and bring about their rapid decomposition. Did a little bit of further study on this. Flies, particularly blowflies and flesh flies, lay eggs in fresh carcasses soon after death. Often within hours, they are attracted to the moisture and soft tissue, especially around natural openings like the mouth, nose, and wounds. And the eggs hatch into larvae within 8 to 24 hours, depending on the species and conditions like temperature. The rapid colonization is why flies are key to forensic entomology for estimating time of death. So you can see why Baal Zebub, which was Lord of the Flies, Lord with a small L, it's a false god. Baal Zebub was in Ekron, or in Canaan, the god of death, decomposition, moldering. And so, like all superstitious peoples, they dedicated a god to it. And Baal Zebub had the image of a fly because of what flies do to dead carcasses, dead bodies. They're all over it, laying their eggs, reproducing. And so they would wear amulets to protect them from death, from disease. And we don't have time to look at it, but the Bible actually gives story of a king who sought Baal Zebub and to try to find out whether or not he was going to live from injuries that he had suffered. And he was met along the way by servants of the Lord, who sent the man that was on his way to Beelzebub back to the king to say, is there no God in Israel that you inquire of Beelzebub? And he said, you will not get up off your bed. You'll die in your bed because you've sought the God of Ekron, Beelzebub. But interestingly enough, Beelzebub was also converted later on into Beelzebub, which we see in the New Testament. Remember, this was used by the priests and the Pharisees, Sadducees, in talking about Christ. They actually conferred this name that by the power of Beelzebub, he cast out demons, which is crazy. But I just think it's interesting that this is the way of wicked man, right? To accuse you of the crimes that they are committing. That's the way wicked, sinful man works. And so they use that against Jesus. But Beelzebub is known in the Bible as the prince of the devils, or the prince of demons, who is none other than Satan, Lucifer, the star that fell, right? So an interesting thing, God's judging them by the flies, sending the flies among them, and then removing the flies, showing his power over the fly, which was their false god. So an interesting turn of events. Well, I'm glad that you've stayed to the very end and stuck it out here with us. We appreciate everyone who comes in, everyone who watches this afterward. It makes it makes us feel good to be able to see so many people in and watching and interested in the word of the Lord. To be honest, that is greatest of all. I'm going to ask you to thumbs up our video here tonight, our live stream, because that will help get this out in front of other people, and a chance then, of course, for them to hear this word as well. Be with us next week. We're going to go into chapter 9 and see what we have in that chapter for next week. And until then, God bless you and good night.